I was very fortunate to have a close relationship with my Zaidi. We became very close all the years I was growing up. I davened together with him in shul every single week on Shabbos. Even after he got remarried and moved to New York, we maintained a very close relationship. We spent Shabbos together countless times, both in New York and in Florida. And ever since he left Chicago, we spent many hours on the phone together. We literally discussed everything. I don't even know how to begin speaking about him. There are so many things that come to mind when thinking about Zaidi. We have lost a giant. He walked around and looked very simple, but anyone who knew him well could testify that the world has lost a giant. Zaidi did not have a formal Jewish education, and throughout his life, he developed himself by observing Rabbanim, literally drinking up every word he heard from them, watching them closely. I have heard him quote countless times things he's seen and heard from the McCarver Rebbe on the Old West Side, the Chernobyl Rebbe in Borough Park, who he was extremely close with, Rabbi Beckenstein in Albany Park, Rabbi Soloveitchik from the Skokie Yeshiva, and Rabbi Fazman, just to name a few. His Yiras Shamayim, his love for Torah and mitzvahs, is what shaped his entire life. I've heard him say countless times, I would be on the phone with him and I'd be about to hang up, and he would say, just remember, learn Torah, do mitzvahs, do good deeds, follow God's ways, and everything will be good for you. He truly believed that doing what Hashem wants for him will make his life good in this world as well as the next. As some of you may know, he even composed a song about doing mitzvahs, as this was his life's motto. He once came to my house and he didn't see a tzedakah box out. He said to me, you have to give tzedakah every single day. It could be a coin or two. Of course, he was referring to the Ahava Tzedakah Pushka, which is an organization led by, a beautiful organization led by the Shaniks. A few months ago, there was a tremendous event, and it was called the Direi Torah. It was in Philadelphia, in a stadium. There were 20,000 people there. It was completely sold out. The purpose of the event was to show kavod, show honor to the Torah and those who study it. When I told Zaidi about this event, the excitement in his voice was piercing. He said, the world needs to hear about the importance of Hashem's Torah. Zaidi was always careful to daven in shul, always, even when he was in his 90s. It took him a couple hours to get up and out in the morning. He set his alarm for 5:45 in the morning to make sure to be in shul on time. Let me explain to you what it means to be in shul on time for Zaidi. One of the first times I stayed by him, I asked him, what time should I be ready to go to shul with you in the morning? He said, 5 after 7. I said, okay, what time does the davening begin? He said, 7:45. I'm like, oh, wow. I said, so how far away is the shul? He said, maybe 3 or 4 minutes. So he explained to me, by the time you put on your talis and your tefillin, and he said, say the preliminaries, he said all the karbanos every day, he said, it takes time. You have to get to shul. But not only was he the first one to get to shul, he was the last one to leave. They literally had to give him the key because he was the first one there to open the door and the last one there to lock it after leaving. Why was he the last one to leave? Because immediately after davening, he would say the daily Tehillim. He finished Tehillim every 30 days. He one time told me that I could start any pasuk, any verse in the whole book of Tehillim, and he would finish it for me. Initially, there had not been a steady weekday minyan in Yehuda Moshe in Lincolnwood. So my Zaidi paid Bachurim, students from the Skokie Yeshiva, to complete the minyan. He personally picked them up from the yeshiva, drove them to Yehuda Moshe, and took them back after davening. And many years later, when he was living in New York, he was davening in the Long Beach Mesivta. He still, at 90 years old, was picking up boys, driving them to shul. Another thing that Zaidi always spoke about was doing tshuva, coming closer to Hashem, repenting and becoming closer to Hashem. He used to say that it's a mistake. People think it's only for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It's for every single day. He lived his entire life becoming closer to Hashem. He never wanted to do the wrong thing. My sister Shoshana was once talking to Zaidi, and he was sobbing. He was remembering a time He felt he didn't do the proper thing in a particular situation. He lived with tshuva. When we spent Shabbos together, he always loved to hear words of Torah at the table and encouraged me to speak at every opportunity which presented itself. When he was in Miami Beach, the building he lived in, they had a communal Shabbos meal together every week, and he always got up to say a Devar Torah. When we spent Shabbos with Zadie, the way he liked it is that when we used to bench after the meal, we would all sing every word out loud together, slow and clear. When Zadie got remarried to Bubby Marlene, Allah Shalom, at the age of 81. Those close to 10 years that they were married may have been the best from his life. Just seeing the way that they cared and respected for one another was truly remarkable. It's been a tremendous zichus, a tremendous merit for the entire Brenner family to be part of the Wiener Shanik family. Every single day without fail, Mark and Mrs. Shanik would call Zadie just to say hello. Our families have really merged together so beautifully into one unit, and we are forever grateful for that. Even though Zadie was very calculated and focused in life, he still had a light side. He always liked to kibitz. He enjoyed having a good laugh, but never at someone else's expense. He was extremely sensitive towards other people's feelings. There's many examples I could say, but the most recent one took place this last Motzei Shabbos, just this last Saturday night. My wife was speaking to him on the phone. They were speaking about one of his friends, and he said, I don't ask this person about his past. Whatever he wants to say, he could say, but I'm not going to ask him any questions in case that could make him uncomfortable. Wherever he went, everybody loved him. Some of the boys in the Long Beach Mesifta still kept up with him all the way until now. I was just in the car with him a little bit more than a year ago. One of the boys called him to let him know that he had a baby. And Zadie was so happy. He said, oh, it's beautiful. Please send me your address. I'd like to send you a gift. When my Zadie was going to be leaving Long Beach and moving to Florida, the last day he was there, they made a surprise breakfast for him in the Mesifta. He didn't know about it. He thought it was just after davening going to leave. And the next day, later that day, I think he was moving to Florida. They called him into the dining room. A few hundred boys were lined up. He stood in front. They all walked past him, wishing him, he should be well, and telling him how much they're going to miss him. And he said many times that was the biggest kavod, the biggest honor he ever felt in his life. And even when he moved to Florida, he was beloved by all of his neighbors. After a very short time, he became very close with everybody there. Zadie impacted my life, as well as many others, in a very significant way. His loss is huge for all of us. My sister Shayna wrote something that I'm going to read now. I'm going to try to read it as my first time seeing this, but I'm going to try to read it as exact as possible. Shemayim just greeted a huge tzaddik. Zadie, such a tzaddik, such an Eved Hashem. Zadie had literal Hashar Shechina. The Shechina rested on his shoulders ever since I was born. All of your life was centered around davening. When I would come to visit Zadie, even though it was so hard for you to move around, and everything took so long, you didn't despair. And all Zadie did was plan ahead. Zadie said, okay, if getting my socks on and getting ready for shul in the morning takes me 4.5 hours, I'll just set my alarm for 4:30 a.m. Zadie, such a tzaddik. The endless amount of times I've watched you totally devote each and every day to davening and saying your tehillim has impacted me and ingrained within me such a desire to strive for more. Zadie, the lessons you have taught us through example have pierced the hearts of your grandchildren and have given us a true understanding of what is really important in life. You taught us priorities, Zadie, a true tzaddik. This is the definition of an Eved Hashem. All hours of the day were based around your davening and tehillim. Zadie, thank you for being a true example for us. Thank you for being the roots of our family. Your lessons will be with us forever. The impact you have made on us has formed us and will continue to form us as we strive to emulate your great ways. Zadie, there are no words in the world to express my love for you. You are a protection for the whole family and Klal Yisrael with your nonstop tefillos. Zadie, the only thing that comforts us at this time is that we know that you are a true tzaddik with the purest of intentions, and we know you're going to go straight up to the highest levels of Gan Eden. We will miss you immensely down here. My heart is shattered into a million pieces. And goodbyes are one of the most painful things. So I want to thank you, Zadie, for really integrating within me a true understanding of the Ames, true understanding that this world is a hallway to the next. And base your days around serving Hashem. If something is hard, figure out how to still make serving Hashem the main part of your life. And remember, we are here for Olam Haba. With that, Zadie, I want to say goodbye to you. But goodbye to you just for now. This is not a permanent thing. We will see you soon with we will see you soon when Mashiach comes. Please, Hashem, if everyone would think to themselves, how can we be more like Zadie and strive to emulate his righteous ways? Hashem would see that all of his children are true tzaddikim. We have to be like Zadie. And there's a chus of continuing to strive to be like Zadie. May Mashiach come. May all pain and sadness be erased. I love you so much, Zadie. Goodbye for now. I will strive to mirror your ways. He's a great Baruch.
Mark.
Gershon Brenner was a great man. I knew him for only 8 years, but he treated me like one of the family. I was his third son. I would tell that to Brian, I told it to Warren. He treated me like one of his own. He treated my family as his extended family. Our children, my children, and Amy, his stepdaughter-in-law, were like part of his family, and we really appreciate what he did for us. Before I get to my relationship with Gershon, I want to talk about his relationship with my mother. He met my mother about 8 years ago, and I was leery because I was a stepson, and I didn't really know much about Gershon, but my fears were unfounded. They hit it off like that. Gershon was devoted to her. My mother stopped driving after a short period of time, and he drove her places. He did errands for her, and he basically, they went to Florida. She stopped flying. He used to drive her all the way on to the auto train in Philadelphia, and take the auto train, and take the auto train all down to Florida. When the plane was only took 2 hours, took it like a whole day. Just for my mother. That's just the way the kind of person that Gershon was. He was devoted. He was a very, very good person. I wanted to talk about him in terms of myself as well. As I said before, he treated me like his third son. He spoke to me practically every day. I know I initiated, but I initiated the conversation. But I call him, he would say, Mark, what happened? I haven't heard from you in a couple of days, or a day or two, whatever it was. He always gave me sound advice, whether it was my job, whether it was our kids, excuse me. And he also was to emphasize, like Jacob Yecheskel was saying, the importance of Torah and mitzvahs and davening. And he wanted to make sure that my kids went to the right schools, high school. For example, my son Harvey, he wanted to make sure he stayed away from the more minor schools. He wanted some more yeshivish school. He wound up at Yeshiva University High School at MTA in Manhattan. And he always was cared about us like one of our own. He also, as I was said earlier, he studied the weekly portion, and he in Florida they used to have a Friday night dinner. The Friday night dinner, he and my mother used to lead the dinner where they had Zemiros, and he gave a Devar Torah, and he loved doing that. I could see it. And Brian was there a couple of times, Yecheskel was there a couple of times. But and also he also quelled when he talked about Yecheskel. He was learning, he learned all the time, and he really loved the fact that Yecheskel was continuing the Torah way as with Brian and the rest of the family. Also, as was said earlier, he loved saying Tehillim and going to shul. And when my mother passed away, I don't know if people know this, but he, with my sister and I, gave a significant, donation, my mother's memory, to the Masifta, because he wanted the Masifta to know, the Masifta to be part of her memory. So, he also stressed the importance of religion, as I said earlier. And as one last thing, and I'll close. When my son Harvey and Bernie were bar mitzvah, he gave us a very nice gift. I said to Gershon, it's very nice. It's very thoughtful. Are you sure you're okay with this? He said, yes. This is what the mother would want me to do. So he felt that was the right thing to do, and that was basically what he tried to do. He was like, I try to do the right thing. So the other day I was driving home from it was like 2 years ago when he was starting to get depreciate. I shed a tear. I felt bad about Gershon. I haven't shed a tear since my whole past 6 years ago. And I hope his memory is. I hope I'll miss him very well. And I hope he goes straight to Shemayim. Thank you.
They're from Mayor.
A lot of them I'm going to say some words for me and some words for my wife, Shoshana. Whenever I heard the words "a simple Jew," I felt it meant a person who tries to do his things, a mediocre person, tries. But once I met Zaidi, it all changed. Zaidi told me a simple Jew means we have to know the basics of Yiddishkeit. Zaidi exemplified for us not to ever forget the basics. Why? So much time, so much thought, so much energy went into just the simple basics of Yiddishkeit. Davening would take so much preparation. Zmiros on Shabbos. There's words that Zaidi never stopped saying. Every time we spoke to him, before this past year, I don't remember one time where Zaidi would not finish a phone call with saying, just do God's will. Zaidi gave me an understanding that God's will is every single mitzvah, everything in Yiddishkeit, everything we do to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, every step of our lives is connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're doing God's will. Zaidi was not a simple Jew. He did Hashem's Ratzon, doing God's will. He's not a simple Jew. There was one time I was helping him put his shoes on. Zaidi was standing, I'm putting his shoe, and he starts to laugh. So I look up, I'm Zaidi, what's so funny? He said, "No, Mayor, what do you do?" I'm like, "What do you mean what I do?" "I'm in yeshiva." He's like, "Yeah, so you learn over there?" I'm like, "Yeah, we learn." He's like, "What do you learn?" I'm like, I learned the Masechta. Like, so what'd you learn? Which shoe do you put on first? I didn't realize I was putting his left shoe before his right shoe. A friend of Zaidi's in Florida, the name of Ellie, he was telling me how your grandpa has a nice taste for cars. He has a nice car. I'm like, yeah, Zaidi always liked to drive a nice car. But I told him, I don't remember not one time, not once, ever, Zaidi mentioning his car he's driving. Not once. But there was never a time Zaidi was not mentioned, do God's will, do Hashem's mitzvot. He had his priorities on straight. He has a midat ha'emet, the truth, like I've never seen before. It was after COVID, and Zaidi had a long beard on. He didn't get a haircut for like a whole year. And Zaidi wasn't sure to keep the beard, not to keep the beard. He ended up keeping the beard. We went to visit him. And Zaidi asked me, Mayor, what's the importance of the beard? What does the beard do for, what is it? I didn't know really what to answer. But if Zaidi's asking you a question, you're in yeshiva learning, you need to have an answer. So I told him, Zaidi, it says that al pizor, al Kabbalah, the beard exemplifies midat harachamim, mercy. I didn't know what to say any more than those words, really. Zaidi just started smiling. He was so happy. I was just going to start repeating the same words over and over, but there was no need. He took those words for face value. The beard means mercy. Midat harachamim, and there goes Zaidi's beard. Zaidi's loyalty. He told me midah of loyalty. What a marriage supposed to look like. I didn't meet Zaidi married. His wife has already passed away. At times I was just as Zaidi. Tell me a story from your past. He would tell us different stories, different relationships he had, different occurrences that happened. I don't know if you realize, but me sitting, listening to these stories, he was a giant of a person. Zaidi was married. His second wife was a Holocaust survivor. I'm like, Zaidi, tell me, what'd she tell you? What was it like? I was sitting on the couch next to him, and he starts to cry. He was such a strong, sensitive man at the same time. He had such a hard time getting down to words of what they did to those children, what they did to the people. All the stories that his wife tell him. I asked him, how was it with his wife and keeping Yiddishkeit? He starts to cry again. He said he owes her so much. He owes her all his things that he does today as a Jew. He owes to his wife. You know, Zaidi, I don't know if it's such a regular thing. Their grandson-in-law, who have such a relationship with their grandfather-in-law. He really wasn't my grandfather-in-law. I was very close to my grandfather. He passed away when I was younger. I couldn't have that relationship with a grandfather. Someone to connect me to the older generations. Calling you every time I'm back, coming back from yeshiva. Just to your voice. It's all your words. Every word you say, all your behaviors was in a way of emet, way of truth. I have a friend. He liked really an amazing person. He likes to boast about he has 5,000 Sfarim in his house. That's what he takes pride in. He does it b'dafka, because other people are taking pride in very mundane things. They're really just everyday stam things. This is what he takes pride in. Zaidi will boast about the minyan he would start in Yehuda Moshe. He couldn't stop talking about it. It's such a connection. I spoke to someone last night. He was telling me, he asked Zaidi, what was your merit, Tarichut Yamim, to long life? How'd you do it? Zaidi told him he thinks his merit was starting a minyan, pushing, make sure the minyan stays alive, no matter what it takes, no matter the weathers. It costs money. He has to drive back and forth in the morning. Who wants such a headache on their head first thing in the morning? Tehillim after davening. The mitzvah. He had an idea just to people to have a mitzvah on their mind. He wanted to say from Sefer HaChinuch, just the mitzvah of the day, just so you walk around in your everyday life, you have a mitzvah on your head. How can you walk around and have a mitzvah on your head? Zaidi never fell from other people's peer pressure. Emet is emet, as black and white as it could be. Someone told me that Zaidi was very makpid on remembering those the past. He's telling me there's a person that didn't leave any descendants. And Zaidi will always light a candle for him. He was very makpid that they always brought cake and juice for after davening. Today's Yudzayin B'Tammuz. We're fasting. Our emotions are supposed to be really the loss of the Beit HaMikdash, the Luchot, all the things that happen. But it's so hard to cry at times. It's so hard. There's no coincidence. They couldn't get a flight to bring Zaidi in yesterday. There's no coincidence. There's Levias today. Zaidi, I was thinking, who's going to be telling me, Mayor, do good deeds? Who's going to remind us every time we speak to you, do good deeds, do God's will? After all, what's it all worth if we're not doing God's will? Zaidi, you passed away and you're still talking today. Maybe it's the first time I ever cried on Yudzayin B'Tammuz. How much pride did you take when we had a son, Yaakov? You couldn't stop calling him Yaakov HaKohen. There will never be a time you call him Yaakov. It's always Yaakov HaKohen. How happy, how excited, how merited did you feel to have a grandson who's a Kohen? The first thing you told me with tears or crying over the phone, you're telling me the first Kohen in the Brenner family. This is what you took pride in. This is what mattered to you. We say, Rachmanim Bashanim Vegomlech Hasadim. Rachmanim, merciful people, Bashanim. Not shy, but a type that, I don't have the word. Vegomlech Hasadim. Do chesed. There's a story the Zaidi told me. When his second wife passed away, told me there was a whole problem with the house he was living in, something to do with the other family. They wanted to make money off the house or whatever it was. So in short, basically what happened to Zaidi, they basically took his house away. Just went into the house. I don't know, you think told me he went through a roof, through the backyard. I don't know what it was. And they literally just refixed the whole house that he was literally living in. That was his house he woke up and fell asleep in. And they took his house. They sold it. They literally just made it as if he wasn't there. As Zaidi, I don't understand. How do you let someone just take your house? This house you're living in. Why don't you call someone? Call the police? Call somebody, I don't know. They're selling the house that you live in. He looked at me, he's like, you didn't know what I was talking about. He's like, are you I'm not gonna hurt somebody. They wanna hurt me, they can hurt me. I should hurt someone, I'm not gonna hurt them. He didn't even know what I was talking about. He goes like this. He's like, I'm gonna hurt them. If they wanna hurt me, they can hurt me. I'm not hurting them. The last time I heard those words was for people who survived the Holocaust. They said they'd rather be the bully than the bully. Zaidi, these midot that are midot that we don't just pick up. It all comes from midat haemet. You're always a truth seeker. Zaidi, our whole family, everybody who has ever met you, knows the words, do God's will. For the last couple of days, these words don't stop ringing in my ears. Zaidi, it's time to do God's will one more time. I was walking with my son in the grocery. He was very young. He was being very cute. I was giving him faces. He's giving me faces. And a Rav comes over to me and tells me, you see how you love your son? Hashem loves you even more. Hashem does that to you all day. Zaidi, there's nothing more than Hashem wants to be close to us again, together with us. So one more time, Zaidi, you need to do God's will until to bring the Geulah. That's God's will. He wants to bring Mashiach. He wants to get closer to us. Daddy, we need to do God's will just one more time. Just one more time. Tell the Borei Olam, we want to do your will. And you want us to be together with your children. Tell them to bring the Geulah. תשמעו תשובה בצורה החיים. ממך שנאמר על כל פנים.
Bar. My father was known to his friends as Gershon. He was known to my brother Warren and I as the chief. And when the Anacles came, he became Zadie. He grew up in Albany on the west side and later moved to Albany Park. His parents were from Lithuania. His father was a butcher. His Zadie was a shoichet. He had two brothers, my Uncle David and my Uncle Laser. And his older sister, Dorothy, is still in San Jose, California. As you've heard throughout his life, his relationships were important to him. His relationship with the Chernobyl Rebbe, the McCarver Rebbe. McCarver Rebbe gave him a Kiddush cup engraved when he first got married. These were the relationships that had true meaning with him, people that walked in the way of Hashem. He knew watching their derech was the right way. He was still wearing his 80s tefillin, who I'm named after. They're so big. The boxes are called gassos. The tefillin are so big. He says, tell him, Zadie, let's get you smaller tefillin so you can put them on your head and it won't be so hard for you. He says, no, these are my Zadie's tefillin. These are the tefillin I have to have. They didn't fit in a smaller box. Really, up until this last Sunday, when I talked to him Sunday night, he said, I don't think I daven today. I said, Zadie, it's okay. He goes, he wasn't feeling good. I didn't want him to stress on that, but something was starting to happen. I didn't want him to stress on that. I wanted to make sure he was going to be strong and be able to, whatever it is, we'll just get through it and we'll do teshuvah another time for that. He was always pretty much self-employed. He was a businessman with a lot of great ideas. He was a master merchandiser. He was putting dry goods in grocery stores and drugstores in the 1950s, way decades ahead of his time. He had 13 stands on Maxwell Street, and he hired friends and people from the community who needed a parnassa to work for him. He was always looking out to make sure people had a parnassa. He always wanted to help someone. He gave people merchandise so they could sell it and make a parnassa. And he never pressured them for it back. And when I started working for him when I was young, I used to say, you gave him merchandise and he didn't pay you. He said, it's okay, he'll pay me. And another time, I said, you gave him merchandise, he never pays you. He says, it's all right, he needs a parnassa. He did it so many times, that people never paid him. But they needed a parnassa. And that was important to him. Zaidie's life, his true success in life, was the emunah, the bitachon, and the yiras shamayim that he had. Not growing up with a very strong base medrash background. It was in him to be this way, and he saw the truth in it. And he always wanted people to do mitzvahs. Mitzvahs was only, at one point, the other word always coming out of his mouth was to do a mitzvah. He found a niggin and made a mitzvah song out of it. He would sing it to people, hoping to inspire them to do a mitzvah. The mitzvah tzedakah for him was very big. When we had our store in Roosevelt Road, the Mishulachim used to come by us, way out of the way. Who goes down to Roosevelt Road to pick up a check? And they came in by us. It was a regular thing. And sometimes we'd have 6 people. And sometimes there'd be 2 drivers. There weren't customers, but there were Mishulachim there. And one time there were so many people there between my brother, my father, and I said, Minchas in 5 minutes. When the Mishulachim looked at me, they said, really? We wrote everyone a check. No one walked out without getting tzedakah. And my father taught me that anybody who ever comes to you for tzedakah, you give him. It doesn't matter why he wants it or why he came to you. If he comes to you for tzedakah, you give him tzedakah. And that's it. Not important why he's there. Some of the things I'm going to say you've heard. I thought maybe they got a copy of my sheet here. But a few things my father was very proud of that he did in his life. Wasn't necessarily making money. He never had really pride in making money. He made money, he worked hard, he made money to support his family and to give tzedakah. He never had pride in it. He just worked hard and made money and went on the next day and the next day. But he started the Yeshiva Parents Association, I don't know, maybe 1969, 1970. He started it. And he was involved with fundraising. And one of the things they did, I was a little boy, and we lived near the yeshiva, and my dad tells me one summer day, you're going to stay home, there's a truck going to come, and you'll have to take some boxes off. They did a fundraiser for the Skokie Yeshiva, selling cases of wine for Yom Tov. And so I waited all day, and in front of my house pulls up a truck. And I go out there, I think I was 10 years old, and the guy comes out and he hands me a piece of paper, And he jumps up on the truck and opens up. He had 100 cases of wine for me. I weighed about 70 pounds. And I was taking off these boxes of wine and schlepping them to the garage. It was a successful fundraiser. That was the type of money that my father had a joy of making. Money for the yeshiva, money for the boys, money for Torah learning. He was also involved with Yehuda Moshe, Rabbi Gutstein's shul. Before Rabbi Gutstein, with Rabbi Fassman, he asked Rabbi Fassman, why don't we have a daily minyan here? He said, if you can guarantee a minyan, you'll have a daily minyan. There was one in Lincolnwood, there was a couple of families there. It was really not, it's not in the hood. There's a few families there. It's hard. And with Rishus, my father took boys from the Skokie Yeshiva and paid them. He picked them up, took them to shul, he brought them back, and he paid them. And this went on and on and on until eventually the minyan took off on its own, and it's still going today, over 50 years later. That was an accomplishment my father was proud of. That was something he liked to talk about, to encourage people the importance of going to a minyan and davening, showing Hashem that you love him and that you appreciate what he's doing for you. Things don't fall off of trees. Everything you have, Hashem gives you. And he knew the only place to go was to shul, to daven. So something can fall off a tree for him. As the guy there, he always made sure that people got aliyahs. And he eventually started the Tehillim after davening. He asked Rabbi Faz, if you can get him to stay, they say Tehillim, it's okay. He got him to stay. You still saying Tehillim? No. They said it for a long time, till COVID. I won't go through 95 years of my father's life, but I'll pick up about 14 years ago, a snowbird in Florida where he always loved to go. My father loved to be in Florida. He was in shul and a shotgun walked up to him and started talking to him and found out he was alone and said, how would you like to meet a wonderful woman? And my father said, okay. He just went there to daven. He doesn't know what she's talking about. He wasn't looking for this. And he met a woman, and he went out with her, and he went out with her, and he went out with her. And he tells me on the phone he met this wonderful woman, Marlene. And he's telling me about her, and I said, oh, very nice, good, you're going to go back to Chicago, you can go back, I'm thinking, okay, it's very nice, he had companionship there. When he came home, we sat down and we talked. He was telling me how wonderful Marlene was. How the chesed that she does. And what a wonderful person that she is and the things that she does for people. And then he's telling me about her family, that they're all involved in chesed and in learning Torah and in doing mitzvahs. He was so excited. He went on and on and on. It's like I wasn't sure if I should even believe him anymore. And he said to me, if I marry Marlene, I have to leave Chicago and move to Lido Beach, New York. He said, what should I do? I gave him a resounding yes. Go. Go with her. If you feel this way about her and she feels this way about you, I want you to go. Because I know that as much as the family is here, and the children, the grandchildren, At night, he would be alone. In the morning, he would be alone. And he'd always be depending on us, and that wasn't his way. He was still a strong man. He was 81. He was driving, going, doing. Nothing was stopping him. I felt it was better that he have a companion, and he should be happy and have someone with him all the time. And it's funny, I gave my father my bracha, he should go, and it should be a good thing. And sure enough, when I finally met Marlene, and I met her daughter Rachel, and her husband, Dr. Ruvin, and Mark and Amy, and the grandchildren, everything he said was he was right on target. And I sat there before thinking, this is either all right or all wrong. It was all right. It was so right. He was right on. He saw the truth. He saw it for what it was. And my father joined that family, and they became his family. And he loved them. And he was involved with the children and the grandchildren. It was a bracha for our family. And I hope it was a bracha for theirs. The family he married into was a family that his whole life was revolving around Torah, mitzvahs, and doing, as my father would say, the will of Hashem, what Hashem wants you to do. And after Marlene passed, the relationship with the family continued on as strong as ever, with Rachel and Mark calling my father every day. I told Mark, you call my father more than I do. And he did. Mark called my father twice a day and 3 times a day, and I was there. Sometimes the phone would ring, and he'd look who's calling. Oh, it's Mark. He'd have to answer the phone. And Rachel called every day. And Dr. Shannock was always curious and interested. How's Zadie doing? How's Gershon doing? And to today, the relationship is as strong as ever. And while he was there, he found another home. He found a new place to daven. He found the Masifta of Long Beach. He went there. He davened there for 8 years. It was the best place that he ever davened in his life. And he loved davening there every time. And I went with him the first time. We got up, we drove to shul. He stopped by the dorm. He picks up a load of boys. He told me he picks up the boys, gives them a ride. It's like an 8 or 10 minute walk. Drops them off. And I think he's going to park, and he goes around again. I said, where are you going? He goes, there's more boys. So he went around again and picked up another carload. They're like waiting for him. They're piling in. I don't know how many guys fit in that back seat. Whatever the maximum that actually fits was there. And after the second round, I said, well, I'm going to get out of the car. Are you parking? He says, I'm going back again. I said, how many times are you going back? He says, till there's no more boys. He says, go in and start davening. And I got out of the car and I went in. He eventually showed up and he davened. And again, the breakfast they threw for him, every boy came up and shook his hand and wished him hatzlacha and bracha. He felt it was the biggest kavod that ever was given to him. I was very close with my father. I remember as a little boy sitting on the couch, my father running out early in the morning to shul. And when I got older, he would drive me to school, but first he would take me to his minyan. And then he would go and pick up my Zadie. And then he would drop me off in school. And then he would take Zadie and go to work. and I had to get a heter to not daven in school with the boys. And as I got bar mitzvahed, I had to have another heter because now they needed me for a minyan. Before, it was just hard for my mother to get there and make the minyan on time. Now, they needed me for a minyan in the shul. So I was part of the minyan. I said, why don't you pick up Zadie? Why doesn't Zadie come to shul with us? He laughed. He said, Zadie already woke up. Zadie davened already. Zadie wasn't waiting for a minyan to daven. Zadie woke up, and the first thing he did was daven. We wait, we get ready. We get in our car, we go to shul. My Zadie, no. He got up, the first thing he did, he davened. And I waited for him to pick me up after school. Sometimes I wait till 7 o'clock at night. And we get in the car, and we pick up the final edition of the Tribune, the guy selling it in the middle of the street. And I'd open up to the business section. He'd start calling me off the ticker symbols. What did it close at? What did it close at? That was his hobby, I guess. A few memories I have of my father that always stuck with me was, I think when I was 5, it was the first time he took me to the mikveh. I don't know where it was. It was in the basement of a 3-flat apartment building. It was dark and it was very cold. But that's the mikveh he went to. I didn't want to go back, though. The first business trip I went on with him, we stayed at the Chernobyl Rebbe's house. And we davened with him Shacharis. It was a big zechus. It's like, wow. You go to New York for business and you end up in the Chernobyl Rebbe's house. And I was just talking with my brother Warren about how he hired this guy when I was like 3 or 4 years old to come in and teach me the Aleph Beis. I was scared of him. I don't know where this guy came from. My brother, I don't know what the story is. My brother knew him. I don't know. He needed parnassa. I don't know what it was. He needed a parnassa, so he's come and teach my son. Promised me anything I wanted. I said I wanted a helicopter. Promised me if I get through it all, I'd get a helicopter. I got through it all. The helicopter's on its way. But his chinuch started with me very young. In shul on Shabbos when we davened, he was always pointing on the page to make sure that I was following and I was keeping up and I knew where we were at. He lived such a life, 95, up until the last maybe 2 years. Actually, just till after COVID. He was doing everything on his own. He lived on his own, he drove on his own, he cooked on his own, he washed all his clothes, did everything on his own. And after COVID, it got hard, and it was during COVID, I think, we started getting him an aide, and I was working out and this and that, and he was very good. He'd come to us for Yontif. It's hard getting him here, getting him back. He was sick when he came here once. I had to take him, and whole thing, whatever. We got him here, we got him back. He spent Yontif with the family. This last time, we didn't want him to go back. For the first time, we really saw some memories slipping a little bit. It was getting harder. We were getting concerned. The only real problem he had was his knee. He couldn't walk, he couldn't stand up. It was very difficult. Bone on bone, and he never complained it hurts. He just said, my knee, my knee. And we were very concerned, and we didn't want to let him go home. I kept him, and I kept him, and I kept him. And he wanted to go. And with Das Torah, we let him go home. He lived in Century Village in Deerfield Beach, Florida. He loved it there. He had friends that all admired him. He had friends that would do anything for him. I said, Chief, you can't go back. You need help there. He goes, they all want to help me. They all want to do mitzvahs. That's what he told me. They all want to do mitzvahs, meaning they're all going to help me. And they did. And I have to say a special thanks to his chaver there, who stopped in by him regularly, was Eli and Sarah Blochman, who took him under the wing, do anything. He said, I'll do anything for Gershon. They made him food. They brought him for Shabbos meals. They took him to shul. They took him to doctor's appointments. They watched out for him. Rabbi Yossi Handler was there. He had another neighbor, Rabbi and Mrs. Perkowski were there. He had a friend, Tuvia, downstairs that stayed with him a lot. His friends Martin and Renee Brown in and out helped him. Hesh and Sylvia Weiss brought him chont every Shabbos. Every Shabbos. And Stanley and Robin Katz, Rabbi Goldblatt, and Tanya Gross, one of his really good friends who was there for him. And Yvette Dib, who was with him many times, helping him. And Mira, who was there at the end. And I'm sure I miss people, and I hope you'll forgive me. People did everything they could for him. They came in and said Abdullah for him. He waited for them. At the end, Moshe Shabbos, I talked to my dad, and everything was fine. Shabbos was good. They bring you chont? Yeah, they brought me chont. Did you eat the chont? I didn't eat the chont today. He was afraid he'd have a stomach problem. Okay, don't eat the chont. Did you eat? I ate. Okay. Sunday I talked to him. Sunday evening. I'm sure Mark talked to him before I did. Mark always had the first call before me, that's for sure. And the second call before me. And I'm not just saying that. You could just look at the phones and you'll see. And Sunday told me, I'm not feeling good. He says, my stomach's swollen. And we were talking about it, and it's 4th of July weekend. He wasn't in pain, he was in discomfort. I talked with Dr. Shanika. We discussed what it could be. We discussed a plan of action. And we both agreed what we were going to do. Because everything was working normal. We knew everything was fine. And in the morning, I had the aide come early. She called me. Your dad is sleeping. I said, give him the phone. I said, Chief, you going to get up? He said, I'm tired. I'm tired. I said, okay. I said to myself, sleep. Maybe he had a bad night. I wasn't there. Maybe he had a bad night. I had a camera. I watched him a lot. I had a camera. I watched how he was all the time. At least 10 or 12 times a day, I would always look in the camera. Where's my father? What's he doing? And if I couldn't see him, I knew where he was. And a little while later, I called her. I said, give the phone to my father. I said, Chief, you ready to get up? And he wasn't talking really good. He couldn't really talk. And I started calculating, it's 14 hours, he's not drinking, he's not feeling good, he's not talking, he's not moving really. I called Hatzalah. And what a crew. What a crew. They came in, they took care of him, they took him to the hospital. And now the clock is ticking. We really don't know the clock is ticking, though. And Yecheskel's saying, we're going to go, and Mayor calls me up, and Shoshi texts me, Mayor's booking a flight. Mayor's a Kohen. You can't go into emergency room intensive care, Kohen. So I'm booking a flight. Shoshana booked me a flight. And Jacob booked a flight. Yecheskel booked a flight. He got there before me. I got there. He was stable. I talked to him. He responded. I felt good. He knew I was there. And everything was good, and everything was holding. His blood pressure was an issue. It wasn't holding. But it was maintaining through medicine. And without all the details, a long story short, Yecheskel and I, and my wife was there in the morning, we saw how Hashem works. Even though it was a hard time for us and what was happening, what we saw. My father's Emunah B'tachon was there. And we saw the chesed of Hashem in this hard time. As he orchestrated everything to happen how it did. It couldn't have went down any different, any better. It went down the exact way HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted it. And my father didn't seem to suffer. And they worked on him, 10 people in the room for an hour and a half to stabilize him. But the chesed of Hashem was there. And we knew it. And we knew it. My father was peaceful. He was relaxed. He was peaceful. All the things they were doing to him. It didn't bother him. It didn't bother him. One of the things he always liked to give in the Dvar Torah was to do teshuvah, tefillah, and tzedakah. Those were what was important to my father. To daven, to give tzedakah, and to do teshuvah. I love my father. I will miss him. He was part of my everyday life, my entire life. I sat next to him for 30 years. I will always remember my father for having the biggest amun on the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And for always wanting to do the rest on Hashem. Do what Hashem wants. Father's Hashem Hashem and Aliyah. Thank you.
Rabbi Gross.
I think I'm speaking not really as a member of the Chicago community, but like everybody mentioned, Mr. Brenner, as he was known to us as Mr. Brenner, that's how he was known to us, was part of our yeshiva in Long Beach. I think that I'm really representing the entire Masifta of Long Beach. We owe you, Mr. Brenner, we owe him a very, very big hakaras hatayv. Everyone mentioned the party that they threw for him, the Sudas Preda, they called it, before he left yeshiva, before he moved to Florida. I was not in yeshiva at the time, but I heard about it. It was something that the alumni were talking about, something that was spoken about by the breakfast table in Lakewood in yeshiva, about Mr. Brenner's moving to Florida. But why did they make this Sudas Preda? He wasn't the first person to leave Long Beach. It's because Mr. Brenner, everyone spoke about him as a father, as a Zaidi. He was a Rebbe to us. He was part of the yeshiva and he made a very, very, very big impression on us. In order to properly represent the yeshiva, I called up a few of my friends last night to hear what they had to say, so that I could properly represent and tell everyone what all of our feelings were. I think they were all pretty much the same. I remember the first time when he started coming to yeshiva, and I remember the rides, and you have to understand, a 10-minute walk for Bachram on the way to yeshiva is early in the morning, especially after staying up late at night learning. It's hard. It's hard doing that 10-minute walk. And people waited. They would wait for those rides. It was something that people started, they waited. We're waiting for Mr. Brenner's ride. They wouldn't walk. But we watched the way he davened. And we watched, and many of all the boys my friends that I called, all spoke about how he was never late to davening. He was never late to davening with the 3 rounds of giving rides to the Bachrim. He was never late for davening.
He was there early. He had his tefillin on before davening started, and he was davening. One of the boys pointed out to me, he said, can you imagine, we're in a town that's surrounded by minyanim. And most of the minyanim for Shachris took about 35 minutes, if that long. And he chose to daven in yeshiva, where davening on a regular day, not Monday and Thursday, took an hour. Monday and Thursday was an hour and 10 minutes, hour and 15 minutes. Who chooses to daven in yeshiva on such a long davening? Nobody chooses that. But he chose to daven in yeshiva, and we watched him. Because he was someone that taught us how to daven. Every single word slow with kavana, measured, calculated. I sat across the Beis Medrash, but it was something that I watched and I took note of and made an impression on me. He taught us what it meant to have kavod HaTorah. The Shiva Rabbi Hoberman told me yesterday, he said that he was such a Meikir Rabbanan, he was someone that respected all the Rabbeim, and the truth is that we all saw it. We saw the respect that he had for every single one of the Rabbeim, and that also made an impression on us and taught us a lesson. He came to yeshiva, and the bima just had the regular cover with no glass, no plastic, there was nothing on top of it. And the Bachrim would learn by the bima, and it was constantly falling off, and he couldn't handle it. He felt that it wasn't covered HaTorah. So he gave money to buy a glass. Right before he left, the first Sukkot, before he went back to Florida, and took some time, but before he was back, Pesach, they made sure to get it. And when he came back and he saw the glass, one of the boys mentioned, I didn't see this, but he said he saw how he walked over and he felt that glass. And he was so proud of it. He said, this is kavod HaTorah. This is the way something should be. One of the other boys mentioned that every time after Kriyas HaTorah, he would walk, he was already, 85, 88, 90. He would walk all the way around the bima, all the way up to the front to follow the Sefer Torah, till the Sefer Torah was inside the Aron Kodesh, then he went back to his seat. Again, he taught us, what does it mean, kavod HaTorah? What does it mean to respect the Torah? Rabbi Oberman said, he said to me, and this is something I noticed myself, he just put into the right words, he said, he carried himself with such a dignity, such a chashivas. The way he carried himself, the way he davened, the way he walked, the way he talked, was with such a chashivas, was such a unique, he said it was within the emos, was such a pleasantness. Somebody said that they were in yeshiva a couple years after I left yeshiva, and they said he brought donuts for breakfast or something one day. He said it's in honor, I think this is what two people said, they think it was, in honor of 50 years of not missing a minyan. 50 years of not missing a minyan. Can you imagine what an impression that made on the Bachrim in the yeshiva? Hearing someone get up and say such a thing? Who doesn't miss a minyan? Who doesn't sleep through a shachris? Who doesn't go on vacation without a minyan? Who doesn't do these things? 50 years without missing a minyan. Another thing somebody mentioned, he said that this was a boy who sat next to him, and every day after davening, he had his chavra. His chavra that would schmooze with him and they would talk hashkafa, they would talk in Torah, they would talk in learning. And this boy said, one day it was Rosh Chodesh, and he mentioned to him that there's a Rabbi Yehuda Chassid that says you're not supposed to shave on Rosh Chodesh. And he said, that's so interesting, I never knew that, but I always felt that it's not fitting to shave on Rosh Chodesh. Who feels a Rosh Chodesh? Who could feel the Kedusha of a Rosh Chodesh? It's something that boy, he's today 30 years old, 31 years old, something he never forgot. That you could have a person who feels a Rosh Chodesh, who feels a davening, who feels a tefillah. And therefore, that's why they made that Sudas Preda. And therefore, that's why, Mr. Brenner, we owe you such a hakaras hatov. Because yeshiva was the Abayim, the Anhala, the Yeshiva, the Rosh Yeshiva, the Mashkichim, the Bachrim, and Mr. Brenner. That was the yeshiva. And he was really, in certain way, he was like part of the Anhala because he taught us how we should live our lives. First time I saw him here in shul, I was like, Mr. Brenner, like, whoa. That was such an excitement. Every single person that I called yesterday before I told them that he had just passed away, I mentioned his name and you could see they lit up. There was a smile that came to their faces right away. And that's why we learned from him. We learned from him what it means to be a Torah-dika person, what it means to live a Torah life. We learned from him what it means to daven. We learned from him what it means to say Tehillim after davening. We learned from him the way a person is supposed to talk, the way a person is supposed to walk, the way a person is supposed to have kavod Torah and give honor to the Torah. And therefore, we owe Mr. Brenner a very, very big hakaras hatov. We should continue to learn from his ways. He's living on not just in his family, but he's living on in the minds of, I'm sure, all the people he touched, but all the hundreds of bachrim that he touched, that he taught, and that he was an example for.
There are people who do their best to help others, show their concern for others. Someone can build a society around such people. Gershon Brenner was one of those people around whom you can build a society, you can build a shul around him. Our family came to him from two directions. Each case, his warmth and feelings toward others showed that was his nature. So from the west side of Chicago, we moved to Albany Park. He was active in the shul in Albany Park. Gershon was one of the main people in the daily minyan. It was a minyan, again, with him at the head. It was one for all for one. A minyan with much personality and personal feelings for one another. The year that my wife and her brother and sister were in Avelis, they were in mourning for their father, so they davened in that Albany Park shul every day, on the weekdays. They were teenagers. It wasn't easy getting accustomed to a new shul or any new surroundings, so Gershon helped them feel at home in the shul. In addition, Gershon had one of his goods businesses. He was in the sock business. So Gershon gave my wife and their siblings a job working in his business. It provided them with some income, and until this day, 45 years later, they often mention his name, and always with fond memories. There was another man in that shul, the Shamish, is Mr. Beckenstein. Mr. Beckenstein lost his family in the Holocaust. He remarried after coming to the United States, never had children. So he passed away about a year after my wife's father, and for our hakaras hatov, for gratitude to Mr. Beckenstein for all he did for that minyan, Gershon said Kaddish for him, and did so on every yard site. Just hakaras hatov, the recognition, gratitude for all that another person had done for a minyan. So fast forward several years to Congregation Yehuda Moshe. So as I mentioned before, so Gershon wanted to start a daily minyan. So my late great mentor, predecessor, teacher, Ray Fassman, told him, go ahead if you can get it going. It's fine. So Gershon lived near the Skokie Yeshiva, and naturally he became a mainstay of the minyan. He was the gabbai. He brought that Albany Park spirit to the minyan. It was also became a minyan, one for all for one. Everybody concerned about each other if somebody was missing. So they wanted to know what was going on. Gershon could be counted on for every minyan, morning, evening, and as Rabbi Gross mentioned, always on time. He never missed a minyan, and he felt, what if somebody had to say Kaddish, and there wouldn't be a minyan without him? It wouldn't be right. People came to your Kedusha to see her Baruch Hu. He just didn't daven for himself. He was concerned about others. He, so to speak, had their back. He was sensitive to their needs. He was aware of the feelings for other people. he wouldn't hurt anybody, and nobody could say a bad word about him. He was quiet, unassuming in shul, but everybody knew he was around. One time he suggested, I guess they did in Albany Park, you should say Tehillim in the shul after davening. So he started saying, the daily Tehillim. He did the first parak with a few people together. The rest of the daily Tehillim he finished on his own. He wanted some people want to say an extra Kaddish, fine, said a Kaddish afterwards. Then he suggested to me, you should have a daily halacha after davening. And that initiative continues until today, as Baruch mentioned. So the Tehillim stopped there with COVID, but the daily halacha keeps going. It gives everybody an opportunity to learn Torah every day. And also, people want to say Rabbanan Kaddish afterwards. Everything's only positive. So when he remarried, we went to the wedding in New York. He was so appreciative, but that was, again, his being, sensitive to other people, kind-hearted, soft-hearted, no fanfare, hakaras hatov, gratitude. As when he moved to Florida, so when he would come back to Chicago, Baruch would try to bring him to the shul for a minyan. It's always a bonus to see him. His being there raised the spirits of the others in shul. Again, his presence brought back memories of a minyan that he started and carries on to today due to his commitment. So I would try when he was in shul to call my wife to tell him that he was in shul, and she would then make an effort to come to see him. All again for the hakaras hatov, the gratitude that he did for her family. So this past Pesach, when he was in town, so Baruch mentioned they were going to try to come to the minyan in shul. Unfortunately, it did not work out. We missed him then, we miss him now, and we will continue to miss him. We cannot thank him enough for all he did for our shul. Maybe you made this yosher, not just for our shul, but for all shuls and for all Jews. Please rise for the Moli. El Molei Rachamim Shochain Bamromim Hamsei Minuchan Yochonal Kanfei Ashchina Malos Kedoshim Utorim Gezarakia Mazirim Es Nishmas Gershon Ben Yecheskel Faivel Shalach Leolamo Bavor Shemispalim Banas Garas Nishmaso Beganin and Taiman Nuchaso Lachain Balarachamim Yasireo Beseser Kenafov Lolamim Mitzor Betzor Chaimis Nishmaso Adonai Nachalaso V'Yanoch B'Shalom Mishkavo V'Nomar Amen.
This concludes the Levaya here at the chapel. The crew will be at Waldheim Cemetery. We ask for those who are going to the cemetery to go immediately to their vehicles. We'll be lining up in our parking lot. We'll ask that you have your headlights and hazard lights on while in procession and drive as close as safety permits to the vehicle in front of you. The family was sending Shiva to Brenner residence, 2916 West Sherwin Avenue in Chicago. There are minyanim times and times when they want visitors. That information is on the service folder that you received when you arrived or on our website for those that are watching on the same website that you joined the funeral. The following individuals have been asked to act as pallbearers: Mark Wiener, Ellis Brenner, Lauren Hoffer, and Yecheskel Brenner. If we can all rise and if the pallbearers come forward, and if we could have everybody go immediately to their vehicles, as we have to get to the cemetery in a certain time.